Fear is placed in our lives to protect us, but what happens when fear is stopping you from going after your dreams, meeting that person, or doing that thing? We're going to find out how to combat that today. I'm Rickey Jasper, and this is the Chasing a Greater Vision podcast. After getting laid off 2 times in 6 months, I realized I had to be chasing a greater vision in my life. I had to be walking into my calling. I spent time building up a successful fitness apparel business, and then now stepping back in front of camera to talk, to speak more, to hopefully inspire you to chase a greater vision in your life. And my goal with this podcast is for us to do it together, so let's make it happen. What's going on? I'm Ricky, and this is the Chasing a Greater Vision podcast. Today, we are talking about fear. Why are we talking about that? Because it's ever so prevalent in our lives on a consistent basis. And sometimes it's good for us, but a lot of times we need to break that thing down. So we start each episode with our head and heart hits segment. What that is what hit me in the head, made me think logically, and what hit me in the heart made me feel a certain way, really played with my emotions. And that could be in the form of a quote. It could be in the form of some sort of video that we've seen on social media. Again, sometimes we know the author, sometimes we don't, but it still hit us in the head and in the heart. So for today's quote, the author is unknown, but the quote is, "You don't find your ground by looking for stability. You find your ground by relaxing into instability." That hit me so many different ways because I feel like I'm going through it right now. Where it hit me in the head was from a logical standpoint. Also, it kind of seems illogical. You find your ground by relaxing into instability, but where it seems logical is instability is a fact of life. The only thing that's certain in life is change. The only thing that's certain in life is a level of instability. So you're going to have to relax into it because there's never going to be a perfect situation or anything perfect. So you're going to have to be okay with that. Where it hit me in the feel standpoint is because of what I'm going through right now. Just moved to a new state, into a new house, doing a lot of new things that I am relaxing into that are completely new. So I'm feeling all of it as well as logically seeing how much it helps. Relaxing into instability is so important, and we're going to figure out how to do that with our 3 tips and tricks. So the 3 tips and tricks of the day, it's 3 ways to overcome your fear. As I said at the beginning of this episode, fear is there to protect us. It's great in a lot of aspects. Where it's not great is areas where we want to do something new, where we want to meet new people, where we want to network, where we want to grow in our careers, where we want to grow, from a fitness aspect. A lot of these things that we want to do, fear is heavy. And I always think of this. I don't have a fear of playing the piano in front of thousands of people. The reason being is because I don't want to play the piano. Typically, where we have a fear is in an area that we actually deem that's important, that we feel insecure, that we feel inadequate, that we are scared of failure, that we're scared of being judged, that we're scared of somebody watching us and them seeing us in a different light because we didn't handle a situation differently. I always go back to this. You're never going to be perfect. It's always going to feel a little bit new, stepping into new things. You're always going to feel a little bit of insecurity and vulnerability, stepping into new things. So we're going to combat that today. So number 1 is imagine the worst case scenario. When combating your fears, you always have to imagine what's the worst that can happen. What's the worst thing that can happen when you take a step in the right direction? And typically, it's failure in some aspects. For me, when I was starting 413 Apparel, the worst thing that could have happened was, okay, we go out of business and I hit rock bottom financially. And I played that over and over in my head well before that actually happened. So when that actually happened, when it was tough, when we hit rock bottom financially, I was more equipped to say, no, I want to keep stepping in this direction, and kept putting my best foot forward in spite of fear because I had already played that over my head. I had already experienced that, that weight of, okay, I'm out of money. How do I make a move? Years prior. And so when it happened, it was like, okay, I can make some things shake and do some different things. And that's what allowed me to continue to step in the right direction. So imagine the worst fear. And typically when you're face to face with that, it's not as bad as you think, or it is pretty bad, but you've already faced it. So if in the slight chance it does happen, you're more well equipped because you've already thought of how you're going to combat that. I think it's really interesting when we think deeply about things that scare us or that we are nervous to do, we automatically start thinking of ways that we are going to solve that problem. That's the main benefit of thinking of the worst case scenario well before, because you already start thinking of plan Bs. You already start thinking of ways that you're going to get past that. So if it does happen, you're not surprised. You're a whole lot more equipped. That is why I always think about the worst case scenario before stepping into something big. Number 2, expose yourself to the fear. Exposing yourself to fear is vastly important, because what it does is it takes the kind of shininess off of it. It takes the scariness off of it. I think it's interesting. Whenever I used to watch scary movies, I would always close my eyes during the part where somebody popped out of the, out of the closet or out of the room or whatever. And I would always be even more scared of scary movies because I never just watched those parts. Now, I mean, obviously now, but over time, in doing that, it's like, oh, what's the worst that could happen? Somebody's going to pop out of somewhere where they're not supposed to be. And then you see it and you're like, oh, okay. Then what happens is you expect it. You're exposed to it. I'm living in Texas now, in a new house and all of this. I used to get a lot of extreme anxiety in new things, and I'll get a little bit deeper and vulnerable here. So when Carly and I started dating early on, like the first year, I would have these weird, extreme, anxiety attacks around the relationship. And I was like, I don't know, is this where I'm supposed to be? And so on and so forth and blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't just around the relationship. It was because everything was new. Well, because for basically 10 years prior, I never had a real serious relationship. I was just, out there doing my own thing. I could be selfish. I could worry about myself. My feelings were never involved and invested into something. And when they did get invested and involved, I'd be like, okay, here's some way to self-sabotage it or run. Some of the things that you do to make sure that the relationship is growing and progressing and one, really being present, I just wasn't doing. I wasn't the most present person. I wasn't the most emotionally available person. And it was because I never really exposed myself to it. And I had this fear that, okay, if I do this and if I really open myself up to this and expose myself in this relationship and be vulnerable, be very honest, I would fail. I would not be a good partner. I would not be a good future dad. And all these fears and everything started rising. And what I had to do, I had a really good conversation with my dad, and he gave me the best advice. And he was like, you have to be 100% all in. And you have to commit to yourself that you're going to be 100% all in no matter what comes your way. And what that did was I realized, I was like, in other aspects of my life, I was doing that because it just relied on me. When it came to fitness, I was doing that. That just relied on me. My career, I'm like, this basically just relies on me. This only affects me. When it comes to a relationship, it's like that now spreads to your partner. Well, now we got pups. Now we have families involved. All this other type of things that are kind of the tentacles of areas that I was scared to really bring into a level of vulnerability. But once I started doing it, over time, the anxiety kind of went away because I was like, oh, this is my new normal now. So some of the things that I thought about, I was like, man, why was I so scared of that stuff years before? That now I'm like, oh, that was stupid. That was dumb. Well, at the time, it wasn't necessarily stupid or dumb, but I wasn't exposing myself to what scared me. So when you start to expose yourself to the fear and to what scares you, you become stronger. And then there's always going to be new fears, but you're now conditioned to facing your fears. Facing your fears, you will be stronger every single time. And I think of this, like going to the gym, just a very simple analogy. If you put 45s on each side of a bench press, so it's 135, and you've never really worked out, the first time you do that, you're like, wow, this is tough. Well, typically over time, that ends up just being your warm-up. Did the weight change? Did the weight become lighter? Absolutely not. You just became stronger because you faced it so many times. So now doing 225 is like, okay, well, it's a little bit more of a challenge, but the 135 is like, no big deal. So you have to think about your fears like that too. The more that you face them, the easier they become. Even if the weight's the same, you're stronger and you're better for them. So that's why you should definitely consistently face your fears. You will become stronger even if the weight is exactly the same. And number 3, visualize what victory looks like. Whenever we're facing fears, we have to visualize what a victory looks like. If you don't know what a win looks like, then you're just going to kind of be putzing along for what? You have to visualize what overcoming and facing this fear looks like for you. For me, we'll take it back to the relationship aspect. I was like, man, if I overcome this fear from a relationship standpoint, if I step into my vulnerabilities, if I open myself up to my partner, if I am the most honest about every aspect of me to my partner, if I intake, the parts of my partner that it's tough for her to open up about, and I process these things and I go about it the right way. And again, we're not always going to be perfect with this. I am not the most perfect with this. I'm still learning every single day and twice on Sunday with so many things that I miss the mark on. But I'm aware of those things and I'm learning about those things. But if you visualize what the end or crossing that finish line of one of the finish lines of the many finish lines we'll go to looks like for you in your future self, you're going to be that much more equipped to overcome your fear, that much more excited to face your fear. And also, you're going to know when you hit the mark. Metrics in life are a huge thing. When we think about how we progress, it can't just be some ambiguous thing. You have to have some level of metrics. For me, my metric was, okay, when I step into new challenges and new things, do I get a level of anxiety that I used to? When I moved to Texas, I didn't get any sort of anxiety, and it was the biggest move that I've made in my life. Moving from 2 small apartments into a bigger household with more responsibilities, with a lot of different things and a lot of things that I wanted to do, that if you had asked me to do this 2 years ago, it would have broke me. Like, I would not be able to mentally and emotionally handle it. On social media, it might be like, oh, Rickey can do this and blah, blah, blah. It's fine. It's like, but when that camera cuts off from the 30 seconds I do an Insta story, I'm a head case. I'm a basket case, right? So those things are metrics. And when you have areas in your life that you can measure your improvement in certain things, and you can measure areas that you're regressing in. And then when you're able to do that, then you can step in the right direction. And that's why visualizing what victory looks like and creating whatever that metric is for you of what victory is, that helps so much. So to recap this whole thing of 3 ways to overcome fear, and this is fear of anything. This isn't just going after your dreams. This is fear of literally anything that you're scared of that you deem as important. First, we have to figure out and we have to be honest with ourselves that we are scared because we want the thing that's on the other side of fear. So what you do first is you imagine the worst case scenario. Typically, it's not as bad as you think. And if you already imagined it, then you can reverse engineer how to get past it if it does ever happen. Second thing is expose yourself to fear. You want to focus on you getting stronger and not running and escaping these things. When you expose yourself, you get stronger. The thing doesn't always get weaker, but you get stronger to handle it. And number 3, visualize what victory looks like to you. So set a marker for what victory is and visualize yourself being victorious, because you're going to step in that on a day-to-day basis. In closing, we do a word of the day here. You can expand it to the word of the week. I love expanding it to the word of the week, but today our word is rise. So fear, we're going to break that down. You all have probably heard it. You can face everything and run, or you can face everything and rise. So we are going to face everything and rise. We're going to rise to the occasion. We are going to see the opposition of whatever it is coming at us, and we are going to rise to it. This is so important because when you have this in your head, you will see fear coming your way in specific things. And fear comes in a lot of different forms, but consistently commit to rising above it. And it's these simple things. And the reason why the word of the day is so important is because it's simple. It's a simple cue that when you feel something, that you are able to say this word, and then it repositions what you think, how you feel, and ultimately how you act. And the whole goal of this podcast is for us to act in different ways. It's one thing to have different mindsets, which is so important, but those mindsets should trigger you to act in certain ways. And what I really want with this podcast and really with today's message is for you to really be honest about what you're scared of, why you're scared of it, where you need to grow because of it, and how you're going to rise to the occasion. Because I'm telling you, everything that you're scared of in the rooms that you're in and why you're scared of it, it's because you need to be there. It's because God has put that on your plate and on your life to handle something and to do something with. And it's going to come with a lot of fear, opposition, but it's also going to come with a lot of responsibility for you to step into it with a mindset of a victor, and it's going to cause you to step into it with the mindset of you have everything that you need to rise above it. So take that today, rise above every single thing today. You can do it. I will consistently say these are things that I'm learning that I am doing today, this week. I'm going to rise above everything that comes my way. I hope you do the exact same. And we're going to do this together. As I always say, let's do it. Let's get it done. And I will see you all next time. Thank you all so much for watching the Chasing a Greater Vision podcast. If you like this podcast, please like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell, send it to friends, use a carrier pigeon, do whatever you have to do. We hope that this inspires you to chase your greater vision in your life and for us to continually and consistently do it together.